Hey, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Matt O'Connell, and this is Spoken Truth Revolution. Today, I want to do kind of an unorthodox podcast to show you some CDC data related to COVID cases and deaths that, again, now the media is spilling out the Delta variant. Fauci is crying on top of the rooftops about Delta variant. Should we be concerned? Should we not be concerned? I think we need to be wise, but I want us to look at the data, and that's what I have right here. It's going to be a bit of a presentation. Hopefully, it'll be pretty quick, but I think we all need to take up the responsibility to look at the data. Do not rely on the media, the elites, the CDC, or we can rely on the CDC, but the spokespeople who are speaking towards the data. I think when it comes down to it, we need to all individually look at the data, decide for ourselves, evaluate the risks for ourselves, for our families, and then make our own personal choices based on our own individual um, risk factors, right? So I think it's very important for us all to do that. And the thing is, it's just hard to trust anybody. The CDC, Fauci, all the elites, the Democrats, you can run down the list. They've lost all credibility, all credibility. And every single line in the sand that they have drawn up for us, in which they had promised us way back in the beginning of the pandemic, hey, just 2 weeks to slow the spread, and then we'll go back to normal. And then they extended it out where we had to wear masks, and then we had to close our businesses down, and then we had to do virtual learning for our kids, and they couldn't go to school in person, and now it's, oh, we have to return back to lockdowns, and oh, we need to return back to the to mask mandates. Oh, just wait till the vaccines are distributed and then we'll go from there, and then we'll get back to normal. Vaccines are distributed now, they're continuing to push forward with their power grab to even mandate certain things that truly do not match up with the data, and we'll talk about that today. And so for today, I'm going to just minimize my camera here, push it off to the side. So what we have today, this is all data from the CDC, okay? And on the left side, what we have is a chart of the daily trends and number of COVID-19 deaths in the US. So it's just the US, and this is again coming from the cdc.gov website. On the right side, what we have are the total cases in the US for COVID-19. Again, it's the daily cases, it's the total cases for each day. It's not an accumulation of cases over the course of time, it's a snapshot for each day. How many cases, new cases, were there in each day? Now, keep in mind, all the cases, you could have got tested 2, 3 times and tested positive all 3 times, and that would have been totaling and included in the aggregate total of cases. So just keep in mind there could be one person that has tested positive from multiple instances as they have gotten their COVID test. But needless to say, what I want to look at is where we were and where we are today, where we were at the start of the pandemic, what the numbers show, and where we are today. Um, uh, uh, Given today is, what is today? Today is August 12th, 2021. So, with that being said, let's make sure we understand the graphs. On the left side, we need to make sure that we understand that the date parameter on the bottom, the horizontal axis, that starts in January 22nd, 2020. It's a little small to see, but that's the start of the horizontal axis, and then it goes through August 10th, 2021. So a couple days ago, that's the most recent data that CDC has for the deaths. Same thing is for the right chart as well. The date parameters are the same on the horizontal chart, on the horizontal axis. Starts in January 22nd, 2020, and it goes through August 10th, 2021, as you can see. Another thing to keep in mind is that the vertical axis on the left chart is the top is 4,500, okay? And the top of the right chart, which is the cases, is 300,000. So again, even though the charts look the same, they're really displaying very, very different um, volumes, right? So as we know, the COVID vaccine, I'm sorry, not the vaccine, excuse me, the COVID death rate as of today is 2.1%. That's a combination of, including all the demographics, age, so on and so forth. vulnerabilities, comorbidities, etc. So again, the death rate for COVID as of today is 2.1%. Survival rate is 98.8.9%. So again, making sure we understand those things. I don't think it's anything that hey, you're unfamiliar with. I think everybody has been tuned in and aware of what's going on. But needless to say, here are the graphs. Here's what the data tells us. Now, the first thing that I want to take a look at is this section here. Okay, as you can see, I've outlined at the start of the pandemic, as we can see, around December 2020, we began to get information regarding the COVID deaths. As you can see, it spikes up at the beginning of the pandemic, and I'm referring to the chart on the left side. As you can see, that the deaths spike up, and then they dip down to, I would say, it starts to dip down around May 2020, right? Now we look on the right side, the right chart. We don't see this chart running in parallel with the COVID death rate chart on the left side. And that is due to, as you may recall, the COVID tests weren't well distributed and manufactured to the degree that they're available as of today. So when we saw the number of cases come in, I'm sorry, the number of deaths come in, it was a disproportionate ratio because we didn't have enough tests available to see what is the total population that has COVID, and then what are the percentages of the deaths out of that population who actually have COVID. So at early on, as you may remember, I mean, remember going to the grocery store was absolutely insanity. We didn't know what was going on. Everyone's saying, "Hey, it's a pandemic." That we saw a lockdown starting in Italy and in France, and people are singing and playing violin, across you know, uh, the hotels from one another and apartment complexes from one another. We're sitting here in the U.S. is like, "Hey, should we like start stocking up on food and stuff?" And so there was a lot of unknowns in this period, and in fact statistically, the death rate was actually higher early on in the pandemic. But now, as we started to get the COVID test distributed amongst the population, which is represented in the outlined area in both charts below, we see that both charts are now they're beginning to run in parallel with each other. We see it looks like in July 2020 we see there's a spike in deaths, but then we see in the cases in July 2020 there's also a spike in cases, and then it dips down. They dip down almost again running in parallel with each other, and then there's a major spike between October and it starts to fall in February 2021, October 2020 to February 2021, and we see the same thing in both charts. We see the same pattern in both the death chart for COVID and then the case chart for COVID. And then as you can see, that looks like that's May 2021. It starts to it goes down substantially, and then it goes up just a little bit, and it starts to go down even more. And you may see both charts are actually trending downward through August until this happens, right? So we see this anomaly in the data, and we see that there is something different going on. And this is when the vaccine started to be distributed. So as we know, COVID really, from a risk standpoint, uh, the risk demographic, as we know, are the elderly and those who have comorbidities. The vaccine has shown to be proven based on the statistics and the data that we're looking at today from the CDC. It shows that there's certainly one thing occurring. Cases are increasing, but deaths are not following suit with the cases, meaning the vaccines are working for those who have gotten the vaccine and for those who were certainly at risk of dying from COVID. This is a good thing. And I want to really emphasize that this is probably the best point that we've been at the pandemic. Because here's the thing, the COVID is not going away. COVID is going to stay here. It's a virus. It's designed to spread. It's designed to be contagious. But the good news is that the death rate now is a lot lower compared to what it would have been. Now, if we didn't have the vaccine, this chart that's outlined here, we would likely see a spike in deaths as well. So I think there's two things I want to mention. Number one, is if you are elderly, if you do have comorbidities, you need to evaluate the risk factors, whether you should get the vaccine or not. If you are high risk, of course, I think it makes sense that, if you look at your demographic, the percentage of those who contract COVID and who actually die from COVID, I think it'd be prudent for you to highly consider getting the vaccine. For those who are young and healthy, who exercise, who eat well, like myself, I work out every single day. I eat great. My family does as well. My wife, my kids, we all make sure that we get our exercise in. We swim a lot with the kids. We work out, so on and so forth. But we are in a demographic in which we are not high risk, statistically speaking, of COVID. And we've evaluated that risk and have decided we won't get COVID, and I'm sorry, we won't get the vaccine unless, we're in a position where we are high risk and we should probably get it. I see a lot of comparisons between COVID and like the smallpox, like, hey, you should get the vaccine because, look at how effective the vaccine for the smallpox were. Well, listen, the smallpox had a 30% death rate if you didn't have the vaccine. If COVID had a 30% death rate, like, there'd be lines lining outside of CVS and Walmart, wherever they're distributing vaccines, and people would be getting vaccines left and right. Like, so don't compare. That's like comparing apples to oranges. Totally, it's a non-comparison at that point. So don't listen to the lies, the media hype, the hysteria going on. This is such great news for this, just not just like the science community, but I wish the media would actually emphasize what we're seeing here. This is actual data that we can look at and say, listen, you know thank goodness that we have the vaccine for those who are high risk of dying from COVID if they in fact contracted COVID, because cases are increasing, but the deaths are not. And this is great news. And we will only see this trend as we continue to look at this data now that the vaccine has been distributed. This is great news. So the first thing, again, as I mentioned, evaluate your risk. And then second thing is you have a choice. You have a choice to get the vaccine or not. Listen, I'm tired of seeing and hearing on social media, on the news, everywhere you go, it's like, oh, for those who are unvaccinated, they're causing this, they're causing that. Listen, COVID is going to spread. It's spreading amongst the unvaccinated. It's spreading amongst the vaccinated. Doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter where you go, you are going to get COVID. It's going to be similar to the flu in regards to it being a virus that spreads, right? We know it's contagious. It's perhaps even more contagious, but at the same degree, we need to lay off each other. So if you are unvaccinated, don't point your fingers at the vaccinated and accuse them, oh, you're such a wimp, why are you getting, you're sabotaging your freedom, etc. And if you're vaccinated, don't point your finger at those who are unvaccinated and say you should get vaccinated and try to compel each other of the stance that you want. You're trying to like do each other's bidding. So stop with that. Don't do it anymore. Just let everybody have their freedom. Okay, if you want to get the vaccinated, get the shot and shut up. If you don't want to get vaccinated, don't get vaccinated and just shut up. That's what America is all about. It's all about freedom of being an individual, having morality, virtue. And if you don't want the vaccine, don't get the vaccine. If you do want the vaccine, get the vaccine and stop pointing the finger at each other and blaming each other for each other's problems, because at the end of the day, this virus is spreading. And the other thing, one more thing, is that when it comes to the mask mandates, there's an issue with this because there's no test proven that the masks actually work compared to an environment where, let me take a step back, there was a test done where there was dummies, etc., that they set up and sprayed aerosol with dummies that had masks on, but they never did that test with the mask off. So again, in the environment, when we're talking about kids and children who are snotty, like my kids are like little petri dishes running around, licking railings and floors and eating glue and all this stuff, and just they're exchanging things like boogies and all that. They're gonna get each other sick. That is normal. That is even before COVID. My kids would come home from preschool and like the whole house would get sick for like a month, and it was just the way it is. And so we need to make sure that we are respecting each other. We're respecting each other's freedom. We're looking at the data. COVID, again, it's a 98.8.9% survival rate. Let's keep that in mind. If you're high risk, you likely want to get the vaccine. If you're low risk, that's really up to you if you want to get it or not. But at the end of the day, um, this this pandemic. It's looking better and better as time goes on. So I hope we all can have a bit of charity for each other, and hopefully this was helpful. So have a great rest of your day.